To tell you the truth, guys, with October closely coming to an end, with Halloween Mania also wrapping itself up once we head into Halloween, I was originally gonna be reviewing Over the Garden Wall for Thanksgiving of next month, but since the final episodes had Halloween, this technically means that this mini-series is Halloween related, even though that some people may say that it's Thanksgiving related, but that's what I thought before watching this show. I'm gonna try to speed this up because, to tell you the truth, I do not want to review a single episode on its own in the same lengths as what I did in my other reviews in the past. Because, to tell you the truth, I really don't want to pressure myself into looking into everything in all these episodes, especially since that me thinking about reviewing this for Thanksgiving will probably require me to rewatch the episodes again, and my viewing experience of this show from beginning to end, I had expectations that are not high in comparison to what people think about this show after watching it. But since it's worth noting that Warner Bros. Discovery has released this show from Max, mainly removing it, especially during this season of the year, is really saying something, because in all honesty, that is the reason onto why I decided to watch these episodes and make my review of it. Mainly the fact that this is really disrespectful, considering that it's a mini-series. Like, this is literally the same thing as what they did to Infinity Train, and even though it may be different, but when it came to this, where it's really well known for almost a decade, is really, really unprofessional. I know it's a stretch to state it like that, but at the same time, this really feels like Warner Bros. Discovery don't know what they're doing for not only the company, but for themselves. But getting back on track, I'm gonna talk about the characters and mainly the development, and then I'm gonna get into the episodes one by one. And instead of just giving an episode its own rating, I'm gonna have the episodes combined into one by giving the show its own rating. Because believe me when I say this, the episodes, while good in their own way, it made me convinced that talk about them one at a time or on their own just isn't really something that really works for this show in comparison to other miniseries from Adventure Time and Craig of the Creek, just to name a few. Because believe me when I say this, since that this miniseries is literally a show, well, it only has 10 episodes and that's it, just goes to show that there was less to worry about when it comes to these episodes, and they put all the focus on combining the 10 episodes into a miniseries. The main characters, Walt and Greg, in this, upon thinking about these two characters, they really felt somewhat that you would expect from the people who were celebrating Thanksgiving in the earlier years. Because believe me when I say this, my ideas of reviewing this as part of Thanksgiving is mainly the episodes that I've just watched. Granted, there were horror aspects that have Halloween elements, but believe me when I say this, I'm honestly convinced that these two characters were taking place during, well, Thanksgiving was brand new, not in the modern age. But thinking about how the final episodes just showcases that all this is mainly a dream, considering that they were underwater in a pond, just showcases of how much that all this is mainly what Walt and Greg are dealing with when it comes to working together, and all the stuff that they did, which was during Halloween. Believe me when I say this, the final 2 episodes of this miniseries just showcases of how differently the episodes are when it comes to the 8 episodes. Believe me, I felt like that these two characters are a lot more underappreciated of how they were developed, since that after watching these episodes, they're a lot more different when it came to the 9th episode. Walt really felt like one of those characters who is mainly an ordinary person, and to tell you the truth, knowing full well that his life is mediocre because he wants to impress a girl that he's been thinking about is mainly the typical stuff that you would see involving a boy just trying to ask a girl out but doesn't know how to. And when it comes to him dreaming about his journey in the woods, when it comes to other creatures, just showcases of how he's mainly just trying to find some good aspects of what to do, mainly in the third episode while he wants to be in school. But considering that the majority of the series just showcases of him just trying to find some solutions, also just trying to get along with his younger brother Greg, is really saying something about how his development shouldn't be a lot to work with, considering that the execution is good for what it is, and it really works for Walt's character throughout this miniseries, and the same goes to Greg. Considering that Greg is a child and he's acting like a child, it really feels like that his actions throughout the miniseries is really his own good nature, especially in the episode where he dreams while he's having a good time, only to realize that something bad may happen if he does a mistake, which leads to him being separated from his brother. Believe me when I say this, whenever I think about Greg in this miniseries, he's not supposed to have a lot of character development in a position of being a child. Like, we all know that Cartoon Network can write child characters correctly in other cartoons, but when it comes to a miniseries just being a miniseries and not an actual show, they don't really need to try too hard. Because whenever I see Greg in this miniseries, he's just being a kid, which is realistic and at the same time fine for what it is. And considering that I understand that people may enjoy those types of characters by not having a lot when it comes to the execution still being good, it really gave me the impression that this show knows what it's doing and not trying too hard. Beatrice, who was once a human, has turned into a bird, and she guides the main characters on their journey. To tell you the truth, thinking about Beatrice in this miniseries, it really feels like it gave me flashbacks of the side characters or mainly characters guiding the main characters from Infinity Train, which is really ironic considering that this came out 5 years before Infinity Train became a show. But whenever I think about Beatrice in this show, it gave me the impression that she is literally doing everything that she can for herself while trying to do the best for the other characters. Because believe me, since that the other characters are flawed in dealing with struggles, she's not the only one. And yet at the same time, she's only doing what she could to help herself, but trying her best to help the other characters. In episode 6, she made a deal with Adelaide, but learning the fact that Greg and Walt are gonna be her servants is literally the last thing that she expected, considering that after learning about the struggles through the last five episodes, since that she teams up with them in episode 2, is an indication that she actually cares about them. But considering that it's all a misunderstanding, or mainly a lie reveal from her, just showcases of how this miniseries isn't trying too hard and only doing what's right when the execution is done correctly. I'm always under the impression that when you make a show, you always need to build up the characters in order to have this type of reveal to happen later on, maybe in season 2 or 3. But for a miniseries, it really feels like that these people who work on this show aren't trying too hard with these characters. They're only doing what they could in order to make the execution good, to the point that with this being the miniseries during the autumn season, it's mainly for the people who enjoy autumn seasons and mainly the Halloween and Thanksgiving seasons. So for me personally, I don't really have a problem if the miniseries is a holiday miniseries at most, since you don't have to try too hard Unless if you made a bad miniseries, which is nothing of what this miniseries is. I'm gonna save the antagonist for later, considering that you need to watch all the episodes to get an understanding on the antagonist itself for his motivations. As for the animation, I'm gonna be perfectly real with you. It's what it is. Mainly the fact that I've seen better animation from other cartoons, but to tell you the truth, with a miniseries that is taking place during the Thanksgiving or Halloween season, I've got the impression that the backgrounds, among other places in the show, is mainly for the style that they're going with, because to be perfectly real with you, I don't hate this style, I'm just not into it. But I can totally understand as to why people found this art style really unique when it comes to the style of what the show is trying to embrace in its own identity. Because with the majority of the show taking place in the dark, it's accurate onto why it's like that, since that's mainly common during the autumn season. It's mostly scary, which showcases the monsters in the show. And when it came to of how the series progressed with autumn turning to winter, is honestly a good change of pace on what the final episodes are gonna be like when it comes to the climax. Because let me tell you, if there's one thing that I enjoyed from this miniseries is the music, especially the title cards before the episode starts. Then again, the songs make sense for the style of the show, but to be real with you, I found the musical scores the highlight of this entire miniseries for how it's executed, and how it really sets the tone of this series quite well. Believe me, I can understand onto why people may find the enjoyment of watching the miniseries during the season of autumn. Mainly the fact that it's supposed to be its own thing, and mainly of how the execution of what people enjoy from Over the Garden Wall has give them a bigger impact on not only their opinions on Cartoon Network, but also the animation industry itself. Believe me, the animation industry back in 2014, it was nothing compared to the modern age of animation, which for me personally isn't saying much, considering that there may be other options, but those are reasons onto why I haven't binged watched a lot of cartoons lately, aside from a couple. With that out of the way, let's get into the episodes. The first chapter, The Old Grist Mill, is where we get the introduction of the woodsman who has a lantern that her daughter is in. And in order to keep her daughter alive, he needs the lantern to be lit up at all times. When I first watched this episode, I honestly thought that this is an indication of what the Thanksgiving tradition of characters acted like back in the day. But thinking about it now, knowing full well that the Halloween-related material is in this, it really shows that the journey that the woodsman is going through is a lot more complicated, and he's willing to do anything for the sake for his own daughter, but at the same time, he's also in a position where he has to do a favor towards that someone who is the antagonist. For Walt and Greg's motivations being crystal clear without the backstory that we get until later on, it gave me the impression that these two characters are dealing with obstacles that they're not into, but they are into when they get to the next area. And then the antagonist is a huge wolf attacking the two characters after Greg has been giving the monster candy, even though he didn't realize that the monster is there or mainly unstable. It gave me a lot more to think about of how the first episode's impression has changed after thinking about how the series was played out as I watched more episodes. Hard Times at the Huskin Bee really gave me the impression that this is all Thanksgiving related. Like, I know full well what happens towards the end, but by watching this entire episode from beginning to end, it still gave me the impression that this is a Thanksgiving miniseries 100%. Like, the pumpkins who are moving and they celebrate, and this leads to the characters being trapped in order to do work on the yard or something like that. I honestly felt like that's something that what Thanksgiving people would do back in the day. Because believe me, just because those pumpkins doesn't automatically mean it's Halloween. Because at the same time, pumpkins will always appeal during the autumn season no matter what. And the way I see it, it really feels like this entire miniseries is focusing on Thanksgiving and not much on Halloween. Out of all the episodes that I've sit through, I would definitely sit through this episode again for the nature of what it's trying to showcase. Believe me when I say this, even though that the show continues to get better after this episode still gave me the impression that this is still Thanksgiving, but at the end of the day, people are going to describe it as a Halloween miniseries no matter what. Granted, my opinions aren't going to change on what people think sometimes, but for me personally, the community's perspective on things is literally the most popular, but it's mainly the non-toxic things that made me have a different perspective of what I feel. The third chapter, School Town Follies, is mainly a school episode. To tell you the truth, if we witness what schools are like back then, this is literally the only way we're gonna have newcomers witness of what school was during the times where technology wasn't even a thing. I really don't have anything else to say about this episode other than being a school episode, considering that Walt wants to be in school, but Greg thinks otherwise because he can spend more time outside of school. It's mainly an episode that you would expect when it comes to a school episode, but I understand that the meaning of this episode is how school was like back then, and it's in the twist that they are doing is that the students are animals, while the only human in school, aside from the main characters, is the teacher. But to tell you the truth, I really felt like that this episode, when it comes to the conflict, school was a lot more different back then, especially in the present of how school has changed a lot. To tell you the truth, I have childhood of what school was like while I didn't have any electronics, but thinking about how school was back then, school really has a lot going when it comes to how this episode is establishing on what school was like during the old years, during Thanksgiving or whatnot. Okay, what I feel about the teacher's father in this episode, judging of how that he is mainly doing what he can in order to make things right, I'm gonna be honest with you, if this is what schools were like back in the day, I'm pretty sure that schools probably had a financial problem back then that they couldn't be able to succeed. Maybe this episode's purpose is that school is important when it comes to how it was back then, and I'm pretty sure nowadays this message wouldn't even work considering that there are multiple schools around the world. I know I'm not giving my own perspective on the episode itself, but like I said, I have nothing else to say about the episode. The song by Greg is what it is, but to tell you the truth, it still didn't convince me enough that this episode is worth talking about, especially its ending. Like, I understand I describe what the episode's purpose is, but believe me when I say this, I do miss school, but at the same time, I'm not an expert at knowing what school was. Mainly of how it's handled when it comes financially. Songs of the Dark Lantern is where the story is starting to pick up on the woodsman dealing with the Beast, who is the main antagonist of them all the while that the main characters need to find Adelaide's house. For me personally, this episode gave me the impression of how the main characters need to accomplish something by helping out the companion that are tagging along, and the fact that we also get to see the Beast, who is the antagonist of them all. But considering that the climax in the final episode isn't what we think, this miniseries knows how to handle its antagonists, even if it's not as better as the other antagonists from Cartoon Network. The song in this episode is better than the last song. which really gave me the impression that they're just trying to showcase the development of Walt, but believe me when I say this, I honestly found it astonishing on the fact that it's giving Walt more of a reason of why he's acting the way he is since the first episode. And considering he misunderstood that the woodsman was the one who killed Beatrice, believe me, I felt like that we all been through the scenario where someone else did something that they didn't actually did, but not in the perspective of what Wilt is. Like, I'm gonna be real with you, whenever I think about these characters, it really feels like that they're not trying a lot, but at the same time, they're willing to make the characters likable for the execution of the writing that is mainly precise. Believe me when I say this, I really felt like that this miniseries is really doing what it could to be good, which for me personally, maybe I'm looking less into this, knowing for what that people may look into this a lot more upon rewatch, but to tell you the truth, it's difficult to get into the series where my passion just isn't there anymore, but it's not fading away completely. I'm trying to hold on to it, but still. The next episode, Mad Love, is where we get the introduction of Quincy Endicott. And to tell you the truth, the majority of the episode is centering inside of a mansion. I found it really entertaining, mainly the fact that the animation in this is better in comparison to the other episodes' animations. Like, what I mean by that is that when the animation is being the way it is, and when it includes different things, it can actually be a lot more better in comparison to the last episode's animation. Granted, it may be weird to think about considering that animation improves as the series progresses, but considering that this is a 10-episode miniseries, it's honestly a first to see how the animation improves in the span of 10 episodes. Quincy Endicott in this episode really feels like the type of person who feels like that the entire mansion is all to himself, but at the end of the day, it's actually another person who has the mansion, and he doesn't realize that he and that person have the mansion to themselves. Like, I felt like that this entire episode, Mad Love is trying to indicate that Endicott is having a difficult time into facing his fears, but at the end of the day, since that he is being used when it comes to the other characters pretending to be his nephews, he wouldn't come to the realization that the spirit is really a real person who has the mansion, only to realize that they have the mansion to themselves after their names were on the wall in the garden room. Like, I'm gonna be totally real with you that whenever I think about this episode and how the characters are filling up the runtime, mainly Walt's confession on his secret, it really feels like that the runtime is really doing what it can in order to fill in correctly. Because for me personally, it doesn't feel like that this entire episode is being watched. Especially when Endicott's neighbor, Margaret, is being revealed to not be a spirit. Well, she thought that Margaret is she thought that Endicott was also a spirit, even though he's not. It's honestly a coincidence that kind of makes the final minutes of this episode honestly good for its own style. I'm not saying that the ending is something that made me impressed, it's just the fact that I can understand what it's trying to do, especially since that this leads to a separation between the horse and the main characters. Lullaby in Frogland really gave me the impression that the animation is getting better, especially when it comes to the song itself, even if I did not like it. And the fact that the 6 minutes before we reach into the rest of the episode is honestly the highlights of this entire miniseries. Since that the final minutes of this episode centers around the conflict of the main characters, Beatrice and Adelaide, the 6 minutes of this centering around the frogs, it really feels like a way that this show can manage to fill in filler, but do it the right way. I'm probably going to say this for a fact that if you're doing the miniseries and you try to add scenes that are somewhat filler, which for me personally this is kind of filler, it really feels like your time isn't being wasted. These frogs who don't speak whatsoever are basically like human when it comes to their behaviors, because being dressed up, being like what humans do back in the day, I can totally understand onto why people may enjoy this episode for how it's executed. Though granted, my opinions towards Greg's frog is mainly mixed, considering that Greg only took the frog with him because he needed some company. I'm gonna be real with you, if Greg didn't took the frog from episode 9, I'm pretty sure that this wouldn't even work, and the randomness of this entire sequence would definitely be 100% filler. Since we're getting close to the episode centering around Greg, mainly the 8th episode, I need to express his character motivation in the 8th episode on how his behavior throughout the entire series is mainly him being a kid, but mainly the fact that the miniseries actually knows how to handle a child character correctly. The ringing of the bell made me convinced that everything that this show accomplished is mainly not enough with the creativity, because Auntie Whispers, who is not really taking care of Lorna, is mainly a character design from Studio Ghibli. Because believe me, every time I look at this design, it honestly makes me think of an antagonist or a weird creature from Studio Ghibli. As for Lorna, I honestly thought that she was gonna be Wart's love interest, but since that it's been revealed that he already has a love interest in episode 9, I'm starting to convince that this character is similar to the character from episode 9, but from my point of view, it really feels like that they really wanted Wart to experience what romantic relationships are like, especially at his age. I'm gonna be real with you, whenever I think about these types of moments and thinking about them after watching all the episodes, there's always a lot more when it comes to them using quality over quantity. Granted, I can totally understand onto what people may feel about this episode, since of what Wart is dealing with is starting to become more of a thing, and the reveal of how him and his brother got into this scenario in the first place. I really felt like that the motivation in this episode is mainly of what Wart is just trying to do while preventing anything bad happening, because his brother is mainly causing most of the problems. Auntie Whispers, who is Adelaide's sister, to tell you the truth, me stating that he doesn't really take care of Lorna, even though that she misses her, I really felt like that whenever I see these types of moments, it really feels like that the execution is honestly precise for making these characters mainly exclusive to this one episode. Like, judging of how that Wart and Greg decides to leave to continue on with the quest, leaving these two characters, it really feels like that the motivation that they need to do is mainly get Lorna the cure that she needs, since that she has no other option to do so, since Auntie Whispers isn't doing anything for her. Like, I understand that there's always going to be disagreements in these types of relationships, but the way I see it, it really feels like that there was a lot more going on between the two. If this wasn't a miniseries in an actual TV series, we would have had more episodes centering around the two. Granted, there may be dialogue, but to tell you the truth, I think it's not enough. Besides, thinking about this being a series rather than a miniseries, it will probably take a while for this to come out, and I can guarantee you that it will have come out in 2015 rather than 2014. Babes in the Woods is centering around Greg's dream, but in the beginning of the episode when Wart confesses that he's given up and he tells Greg that he gets into trouble way too many times, which resolves his plans to be messed up due to it, he gives up while Greg becomes the leader. To tell you the truth, with the episode centering around Greg's dream, It's like a filler episode, but at the end of the day, it kind of shows that the development that Greg gets in this, he's not ready to experience the real world in comparison to Walt. Like, every time I think about Walt and Greg in this, it really feels like that the dynamic centers around the person focusing on the real world, despite with disabilities, while the other is mainly the opposite. Except that the disabilities that he has are a lot more different. With the episode's purpose centering around Greg's dream is supposed to be fun-loving and what a child dream is like, I'm gonna be really honest with you that the final minutes of this episode is where Greg gets more development on the fact that he wants to do this on his own, considering of how he wants to do the right thing, only to realize that he's just not ready for the real world in comparison to Walt. If he didn't get the wish from the Queen of the Clouds, I can guarantee you that there would have been a huge separation between the two, and the ending would have been a lot more darker, but considering that this miniseries doesn't try too hard to be dark, I think it kind of sums up onto why Walt's disability of losing his brother is literally what causes a huge problem onto why the following episode makes the previous episodes change drastically to the point that instead of being Thanksgiving related, it may be convinced slightly that it's Halloween related. Into the Unknown is honestly a lot more convincing onto why that this is a lot more Halloween related, judging of how that this episode is taking place during Halloween. Like, I can understand that people may debate that this is somewhat still Thanksgiving related, judging of how that the other episodes have Thanksgiving themes into it. I really felt like that the theme centering around the pumpkins and the scary elements, it really feels like that this miniseries isn't trying to be Halloween related, considering that it was airing in November rather than October. Walt's real love interest is Sarah, who isn't part of the dream world or hallucination world that happened before this episode, considering that this episode technically took place before the first episode, which leads to the events of the final episode. But I'm gonna be really honest with you, thinking about Walt's situation on being too shy to express his poetry to Sarah is honestly what some people would do if they're into poetry. Sitting through this episode after witnessing the last 8 episodes that take place after this episode, including the final episode, gave me an understanding that if Wilt and Greg were part of what Thanksgiving was new rather than dreaming, I'm going to be convinced that it wouldn't even work out after the realization that they were present in the present time when it comes to Halloween. To tell you the truth, after watching this episode, the knowledge of Walt and Greg being in that timeline rather than the present, it made me convinced it wouldn't work out. Which, for me personally, if I watched one episode from this and only review one episode from this miniseries, I can guarantee you that I would be missing out a lot, which will probably make my review of the first episode outdated. So with this knowledge centering around Walt and Greg being in a scenario where Walt just wants to make sure that Sarah doesn't listen to his tape recorder, which leads to the events where they go over the garden wall, and just when they were about to get hit by a train, they go down the hill and get into a pond or a river, which really leads to the events of everything that happened from episodes 1 through 8 and episode 10. I'm gonna be really honest with you, thinking about this episode called Into the Unknown gave me a different perspective on why people say that this is a Halloween miniseries mostly than a Thanksgiving miniseries. If you ask me, knowing full well that this is mainly a Halloween miniseries rather than a Thanksgiving miniseries, reviewing the miniseries from beginning to end is honestly the better option than reviewing one episode. I have to say that this episode giving me a different perspective on all this is a reason onto why watching episodes 1 through 10 is a better option. With only one more episode left, I gotta say, The final episode, concluding everything from this miniseries, really shows that an ending to this miniseries is better in comparison to the other miniseries that I've seen, mainly from Adventure Time, even if I didn't watch the final miniseries, and Craig of the Creek. I haven't watched the Heart of the Forest miniseries yet, but to tell you the truth, just by watching the ending from this, it's really of how much effort and passion there was to put into this, since that it's not really a TV series. Granted, I keep going back and forth on this should be a TV series or not, but there's always possibilities, and after 9 long years, well, almost 9 long years, people are probably going to have a lot of different perspectives on what they really want to see from this, and what they really enjoy from this, mainly from the inspiration. The Beast, who is the antagonist in this miniseries, I honestly thought that he was gonna do something menacing towards the end. Mainly the climax that I usually expect from other series with their villains that always ends with a climax, but the climax is a lot more different in comparison to the other climaxes, mainly the fact that there isn't a climax between the main characters and the antagonists. With Wilt being the one to lead the group even though he remains solo, which leads to him being in the trap after helping out the Beast, with Wilt just trying to help out. If it was the other way around, with Wilt being trapped inside of a tree, being tangled, I'm pretty sure that Greg will probably have a reaction like Wilt, considering that he's not old enough to handle emotional depression. Granted, I may be wrong, considering that some child characters like Greg would deal with emotional depression, as in Greg being those types of kids, but to tell you the truth, I really felt like that whenever I see these two characters being together, it really feels like it's the type of characters who would feel when they're different from each other. Granted, it may be debatable considering it happens in multiple cartoons, but since this is the main focus when it comes to our protagonists, I can see onto why people enjoy this dynamic, especially the end where the woman's blew out the candle that his daughter's soul was in order to eliminate the Beast, which leads to Walt waking up and getting Greg and the Frog out of the water, in order to come back to reality. To tell you the truth, with this climax being the way it is, it kind of shows that you don't need a serious climax. As long as you make the climax good enough, you're all set. And to tell you the truth, this is honestly the final element that really makes this miniseries as it is, and even though I do not like some aspects of it, mainly the songs, I can understand why the ending from the final episode is the way as it is. For me personally, the praise of what people have been giving towards this miniseries, it's not really glorified, considering that there was a lot of passion and admiration put into this. And while I do not enjoy it as much as other people, from my point of view, I can instantly see the admiration being put into play into this miniseries. Seeing the characters' arcs concluded when it comes to Beatrice's and her family back to normal, I gotta be really honest with you, it made me appreciate of how much effort there was into this miniseries. And to tell you the truth, if Cartoon Network wanted to make more miniseries, I think that their idea was mainly giving it to Adventure Time, which the following year they did with Stakes, 2017 Islands, and The Elementals, or a different title that starts with an E, later on in 2017, and they gave that to Clarence and 2 more for Craig of the Creek. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's honestly a shame that they never do it when it comes to making an original cartoon, because for me personally, I would probably see the admiration a lot more, and I'm pretty sure that the admiration is similar to Affinity Train, since that each season is 10 episodes. But considering that that is an actual series, I don't think that 10 episodes in one season is considered a mini-series. I gotta say, putting this in Halloween Mania at the last minute is honestly a good decision in order to make this a lot more unique, because to tell you the truth, I know I took this month seriously in comparison to other holiday schedules. I have to say, if I save this for Thanksgiving, I'm pretty sure people will probably not be able to be in the Thanksgiving mood when it comes to Over the Garden Wall. Granted, that's what I immediately thought before watching this, but since that I'm fully convinced that this is what people usually watch during the October month, mostly when it comes to the autumn season, this is probably a different kind of Halloween rather than the Halloween that I've been talking about since this month began. Granted, it's still debatable if you really want to see this as a Thanksgiving miniseries, but at the same time, it could be both. It's just that there are different types of Halloween that maybe it centers around the history of it, and maybe this is maybe the history rather than Thanksgiving, or maybe still Thanksgiving, but I really didn't want to go in full analysis on each episode. That's why I went as fast as possible, because to tell you the truth, thinking about this would probably be a lot more difficult, and more of a reasons onto why I would have scrapped this review rather than making it the way it is. But to be a month ahead before Thanksgiving, I'm honestly thankful that I managed to complete this review and put it in one of the final slots of October. Granted, I can understand that last-minute decisions may be a bit annoying, but sometimes it's mostly a good thing. So with that being said, I'm giving the entire miniseries an 8 out of 10. With Halloween coming next Tuesday with only 8 more days left of Halloween Mania, I'm gonna say I still have some good videos along the way, especially the most unexpected ones. Believe me, just because we're in one more week until Halloween comes next Tuesday doesn't mean I save the least for last. This schedule is just like every other schedule that I did in the past. Christmas, Summerpalooza, you name it. I'm Lonely Fanboy 48 here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.